Hey everyone, and welcome to the GXM podcast. We take a good hard look at news and topics around video game music and the intersection between the games and music industries. We aim to publish fortnightly, so please be sure to subscribe to catch us on the regular. My name's Tom Quilfelt. I'm a freelancer and game music fan, as well as doing marketing, community management and A&R for video game soundtrack label Laced Records, and I podcast with the Cane and Rinse team. Joining me is journalist Matt Ombler, who has interviewed a host of composers, music artists and others across this space, with pieces published in NME, The Washington Post, Wired and many more. Matt, you've just been telling me off air that you've had a serious session finally with Zelda. How did it go?
It went fantastic. I'm all Zelda'd out, but it was class. It's the first time in a long time where I can just remember having like a full day to do nothing and just play video games. And normally when I set aside time to do that, I get bored and end up doing something else. But yeah, did my first temple or dungeon or divine beast or whatever you want to call them. The whole build up to that in the Rita place with the Dragon Roost music playing from Wind Waker and new arrangements of that. It was absolutely blowing my mind. Like it was just phenomenal, because I think we were talking about this before, where I think between us we've only had an hour maybe at most, you know what I mean, just bursts of time to play it, and that's really not enough with this to actually get into it. So I think this is the first time I felt like I've actually really made some progress in the game and hit a stride. So yeah, it was banging. Have you managed to find any time to pick it back up?
We've been tickling at it. But I mean, I play so many games across the family. It's like with my nephew, I'm playing Divinity Original Sin 2. I've got a co-op mate for Returnal. My wife and I are playing The Quarry. I'm playing Captain Toad with my youngest, helping my eldest with Dragon Quest Builders 2. And then somewhere amid all of that, we sort of snatch a few moments of Zelda. So it's going to be very, 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 very slow progress, I think. But that's fine. That's fine. But, you know, my 7-year-old earlier was in the kitchen. He was like, Dad, what if we got like a rock and then fused it to a stick and then ultra-handed that to like a rocket and then put that on our shield and then just like smash someone in the face with it? I was like, yeah, that's the kind of creative thinking. It's completely nonsense, but it's the kind of creative thinking I'm looking for. So we did do an awesome, super tricky shrine actually that involved like stealth and ascending and just all kinds of thinking through and puzzle solving, lateral puzzle solving, which was really cool actually. But have you been listening to anything? What have you been spinning this last few weeks?
So the Sonic concert, Sonic Symphony World, got announced. Sonic Symphony World Tour even. Since I saw that announcement, because they already announced it, I think, quite a while ago, but they just hadn't announced dates, and it was initially planned for 2023, and then I was thinking, well, we're quite far in now, when are they going to announce it? Is it going to get announced? But yeah, saw that go up. Tickets were sold out, which is perfect. But yeah, as soon as I heard that announcement, I just went full-blown Sonic mode. And was digging into a remix album. So there's a compilation album that came out in 2020 just called Sonic the Hedgehog DJ Style Party. And it's basically all of the club style like remixes and music just from throughout the Sonic timeline. So I've just had that on and was just absolutely bopping just towards the end of the week, going into the bank holiday, just like, yes, bank holiday, going to play Zelda, Sonic music, yeah. And it was class. Just very, very, very cheesy club music. But yeah, what about you?
Well, so Laced put out the Warhammer 40,000 Mechanicus soundtrack years ago now on digital. and people kept asking us for the vinyl, and we were like, this isn't the biggest AAA game in the world, so it's interesting when people keep asking over and over again for something. So it's a fantastic soundtrack. Anyway, I knew that already. I mean, it's got all this organ all over it. It sounds absolutely immense. And so we checked the Spotify numbers. They're obscenely massive. And so we were like, yeah, let's do it. And so the Warhammer Skulls showcase happened on Thursday. And because I've been brushing up my After Effects skills, which were non-existent before, I made a little After Effects video to kind of use the renders, because we don't have the products in hand when we put it live. So we can't take nice photos of it yet. So we have to sort of use the what exists of the assets we've got in the mock-ups and kind of try and turn that into a nice 3D video to go along with the track. So, and that got played on the Skull Showcase. So we were all sitting there, the whole team was sitting there watching the showcase and waiting for it to come on. The chat was quite hostile to everything else. And then when the vinyl announcement came up, they were really kind about it. So,
that's class.
So that kind of made my week. Yeah, that was really nice.
Because there's been a Warhammer game that's just come out recently and it looks well up my street. Is it Bolt Thrower or Bolt Gun or something?
Bolt Gun, yes. That's the boomer shooter, 90s kind of throwback thing.
Have you heard the music in that, or do you know what it's like? Because I'm just seeing this throwback thing. Like, I love my old school kind of like first person shooters where they're just silly, and this looks like silly fun. It
hasn't come across my desk yet, but I anticipate it doing so, at least for digital. So,
and it reviewed pretty well as well. I think even like I'm playing Zelda now, and we've both got probably disgusting backlogs, and I can just see my gaming backlog just growing and growing and growing,
stretching on into infinity, like that bit in Inception or something, just rising up into the sky. Just this. I'm trying to be zen about the backlog, because let's face it, there's just not enough time.
No, and then Final Fantasy 16 is out in less than a month now.
Yeah.
So that's another one. I'm not even going to be done with Zelda by that. No one's going to be done with Zelda by then. Woe is us.
Woe is us. Well, let's get on to the news and maybe save ourselves some time so we can get back to Zelda after this recording. We're going to get into the news. So I guess I'll quickly lead off with the Sonic Symphony, since you've already mentioned it. The Sonic Symphony World Tour concert series, celebrating over 30 years of Sonic music, and it will kick off later this year, that's 2023, with concerts at the Barbican Hall in London in September and the Dolby Theatre in Los Angeles a bit later in September. We'll, of course, put the link in the show notes. Matt, I know you're very excited about this. So you just didn't manage to get tickets, did you?
No, I think we went live at 10 in the morning. Normally something like this, I'd be on it. Oh, I was going to a wedding, that's why. I was going to weddings. I was chatting to Rich about it, because Rich was trying to get tickets as well, asked me to get tickets.
That's the one of the guys behind the We Love Video Game Music Twitter account, who goes to, Rich Stokesy, who goes to basically every single video game concert there is.
I don't think he's missed a video game concert. Every time there's a video game concert, you know he's going to be there. But yeah, he basically asked me to keep an eye on tickets. I said I would do, thinking they'd go live like maybe in the afternoon, then realised I was going to be at a wedding anyway, so I couldn't. But yeah, it went on sale, I think early in the morning, sold out. I'm gutted, because I've been waiting for this for a long time, because that live stream they did is just one of the best video game concerts I've seen. And not only that, obviously, I bang on all the time about how there needs to be like wider representation when it comes to different music genres at these game concerts. And you've got all of this amazing orchestrated music from across the Sonic series in the first half of the concert. And then the second half for the live stream was Crush Forty doing all of the rock stuff. from Sonic Adventure 2 Battle, Live and Learn. Like, I genuinely, like, I will start a mosh pit if I can manage to find a way to get there, because those tunes fell at such like a pivotal moment in my life when I was like a mini mosher and stuff. So just hearing that in a game like Sonic, because I grew up with Sonic as well, I was just like, it's so good. It's so good. I'm so angry. I'm not going. I need to find a way to get there.
If any listeners happen to have a spare, you know who to maybe offer one of them to.
Please, I beg. On that really quickly then, because obviously we seem to be moving into a thing now where we've got more game series getting their own concerts rather than just kind of here's a load of music from PlayStation, here's a load of music from Xbox or whatever else.
So Assassin's Creed had one, has had a concert going around, yeah.
What video game series would you like to see have its own concert tour in a similar vein to like the Assassin's Creed stuff, the Sonic one now, Final Fantasy obviously? Do you think there's anything out there that's not been done yet that's kind of rife for this?
The Ueda games, so Eco, Shadow of the Colossus and The Last Guardian, I know pieces from those have turned up in different concerts, but actually it would be cool to see. I don't know how you would brand it.
Yeah.
That would be quite tricky. But the music from those 3 games is so wonderful. It would take a bit of work to kind of decide how they were going to do it. But I think that would be a really fantastic concert to go and see. How about you?
Mario Kart.
Specifically Mario Kart.
Just Mario Kart. Full. They've got the Mario Kart band, right? And a lot of those session musicians in the Mario Kart band play in like big J Fusion bands like T-Square and stuff like that. So if they could put something like that together, but just with like a mix of musicians just playing music from the Mario Kart series. Have you seen those? There were some videos that went viral, and I think it was from a bar in Australia where they had a Mario Kart tournament and there was a live band playing the music on screen.
No, I didn't see that.
So, like, obviously somebody would get a power-up and then it would just go into the power-up music and the band would just switch back to doing the original track song.
We've got to drop the... if you can find it, we've got to drop the link for everyone.
I will hunt it down. It's one of the best videos I've ever seen. But yeah, Mario Kart tour, it'd be sick.
Speaking of Nintendo concerts, there's a story you've got here. Do you want to tell us about the charity Pokemon concert?
Yep, so there is a charity Pokemon concert being held in Japan. It's taking place at the Pacifica in Yokohama. It is in person. Tickets are 3,000 yen, with all proceeds going to the Pokemon With You charity organisation. But if you don't live in Japan, do not worry, because they are also doing a global live stream with it, which is great because you get a lot of these really cool concerts happening in Japan, and not all of them are streamed. Quite a lot of them are in person only, so it's great that this will be streamed.
Absolutely. And we've got a couple of other stories this time. One of them, Shawn Layden, who used to work for PlayStation. So what's this about a new company that he's joining the board of?
He's joined the board of an AI music gaming company called Plus Music. So we've covered this before, not this announcement specifically in this company, but this kind of rise in adaptive audio built around AI for game soundtracks. So in this case, he's joining the board of a company called plusmusic.ai. Not much information out there at the moment, but obviously Shawn Layden, absolutely massive name, clearly sees a lot of potential in this business, clearly sees a lot of potential in AI for adaptive audio for game soundtracks specifically. So I tried researching this more earlier, just in terms of, because it's something where I think we both know a little bit about dynamic audio and reactive audio, but when it comes to the AI tools that could underpin those, that's something I don't know much about. So I just did some Googling earlier, found... do you know where you find an article and it tells you how long it's going to take to read and gives like a little prediction? Yeah. There was an article in GameDeveloper.com on this topic, and it just said 59-minute read. I was just like, me and you, we always say, like, we're the kind of writers, when we write something, we write lengthy articles.
We go
right?
long.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, 59-minute read. I was howling, but I'm genuinely going to find some time. I'll whack a link in the description as well, because it looks super interesting. I just need to find an hour I can just commit to putting my head down and reading it
when you're not playing Zelda.
Yeah.
And then we got the last story this time is a quite a cool crossover. I think Dead by Daylight as a game has had a lot of brand crossovers, hasn't it? All with kind of horror themes generally. I can't remember who they've had in apart from... Have they done a Resident Evil crossover? And I'm sure...
Resident Evil, Walking Dead, all like the Halloween films and stuff like that. Any major kind of like entertainment IP that you can think of that has a horror-ish kind of thing, it's probably been in Dead by Daylight.
So who's joining the lineup this time?
This time it is Iron Maiden, which is, they've been doing bits recently. I think Laced did the trailer for Lords of the Fallen recently, didn't you?
That's right. The guys in the company who do that kind of work scored a rather. I thought the trailer was great as well. If I do say so myself, Lords of the Fallen is obviously the Souls-like, which has had 2 entries already, I believe, and this is a kind of reboot-ish kind of thing. And yes, they had Fear of the Dark by Iron Maiden in the trailer, and seemed to go down really well.
It works so well. But it's cool to see a band like Iron Maiden, who probably have an older demographic, doing more stuff like this and doing gaming integration. So that's one. And the other band is Slipknot, which is cool. So basically the integration is going to involve a slew of new features and updates, including new costumes inspired by both Iron Maiden and Slipknot. So the Iron Maiden stuff is themed around their mascot Eddie, that lovely, lovely skeleton. Slipknot stuff, 9 masks, so you've got the 9 masks and the different members in there. I'm tempted to actually give this a try and see what they're like, because I've never played Dead by Daylight. I think Limmy streams it quite a lot. I think I see him streaming it. Limmy, the Scottish comedian. He always seems to be streaming just like horror games. So, might check that out.
Well, we're going to go into our topic this time. I interviewed Chase Bethea, who is a video game composer. He's award-winning video game composer. And we talked about his career and, how he's finding it as working on various indie games and different projects. And we sort of tried to get towards talking about genre in video game scores, specifically different genres or lesser trodden genres, music genres, and how he likes to try and bring something new to each project, explore a new style just to keep himself on his toes. And we talked quite a lot actually about kind of convincing developers or working with developers or getting developers to trust in the composer's approach in terms of bringing new music genres that might not have been in many games before. There's a light emphasis on his recent score for puzzle game On the Peril of Parrots, for which he did a bossa nova score. So yeah, I really hope you enjoy this interview. Really lovely to chat to you, Chase. Obviously, we've been in contact for a little while, over a year, I think, or something.
Yeah,
and
a few years now.
I'm always impressed to see your hardworking.
Thank you.
You're definitely visibly one of the more hardworking composers out there, and it's always fantastic to see you kind of cheerleading yourself, cheerleading others, getting involved with events, that kind of thing. And I know obviously you're working hard on the work itself, the projects themselves. Can you tell me a little bit about how you got into game composition and audio? What's your background? Are you classically trained or a different instrument picked up first?
Yeah, so first of all, I want to acknowledge, thank you so much for the compliment and those acknowledgements that you see. It really does mean a lot, because it's just me. I'm in my own mind, I'm in my own world, and so I'm just trying and experimenting every day that I can do something and hopefully it be noticed. So thank you so much. As far as how I got started, the story kind of goes is that I have been around music the majority of my life. My mom is a My mom is a singer, actress, dancer, performer, so she's a triple threat in that regard. And I had a toy keyboard growing up. My father bought me an alto saxophone once I got into later grammar school, along 5th grade. But my mom has always been singing, and I guess I had always learned music naturally. I remember the story kind of goes a bit, whereas there was a song that by Quincy Jones that came on called The Secret Garden, and I learned the lyrics of the song. I think I was maybe about 2 or 3 years old, and I knew the song is about 6 minutes long, and I knew the entire song. And my dad was my father was so shocked because he thought that my mom taught it to me. And so when I followed up with the story, I think last year, and I said, well, Mom, did you teach it to me? She's like, no, I had it on, so maybe you learned it on your own. So I guess I just learned this 6 minute song on my own. But yeah, so I got into classical piano once I went to community college at Moore Park, and I was studying under Professor DeCesar, and I was in the applied program there, and I took classical piano for about 5 years. And then, but growing up in Chicago in my earlier years, I listened to a lot of jazz. There was a lot of smooth jazz on the radio. WNUA 95.5 was the station. And I also had a Game Boy around 94, and then was listening to and playing a lot of games at that time. So I actually taught myself, I guess, how to write game music on the Game Boy camera, because they had this little thing where you could write your own music if you did this for the mini game, and you unlock this mini game, and it was supposed to be like a DJ thing, but it turns out where you just write in a tracker form. There was 3 channels, and I was writing things like that on the Game Boy camera. So yeah, from there, Moore Park College, and I went to Cal State Northridge, finished up my studies at uni there for media composition. I also went to Los Angeles Recording School before that, way before in terms of, I think this was in 2007 to 2008, and got my audio engineering degree. So I have about 3 degrees in music. It's all music related in some way.
That's a really comprehensive education you've got in terms of this specific field. In what way do you think that classical piano in particular has influenced how you write and how you approach music?
For classical piano, I had decided I was going to go back into school. I kind of gave you a jump around timeline, but for classical piano, the influence was mostly me already deciding I was going to be a video game composer. So I knew that who I was going up against in terms of the industry and their education and their experience, and I wanted to be able to meet them at that level competently. So I learned that I needed to study any and all of the techniques so that's why I started from Theory 1 in musicianship, and I took piano lessons, and I went through the courses and learned about all the areas of classical music, and then Baroque music, and Romantic and Impressionist, avant-garde. I really did a deep, proper dive, because I knew that, like I said, other video game composers knew it as well. And I also could tell through the studies that they were influenced. I was the one, I think, in my class to find that the bicycle theme from Pokemon Red and Blue was a 3-part fugue. And just instantly click with it and understand. I was like, wait, this is a fugue. Or if it's not, it's one of those Baroque type of techniques that Bach would typically write.
Games can be stealth vehicles, can't they, for different types of composition, classical styles, and then everything beyond that.
Yeah, that's what makes, I believe, video game composition so great, is that we can amalgamate a bunch of different genre styles to create something new and unique and fresh. It's not just specifically genre direct, and it doesn't have to be like that all the time. It can be, right? It does kind of start out that way in earlier game music, but then as it evolved, at least I think in the sometime I would have to say mid 2000s, it started to evolve a little bit more, if not before. And the only reason I say that is because in my ear, hearing obscure video game music, I was able to identify, oh, there's a conflation happening here, and it's not being typically recognized because it's not a Zelda, it's not a Earthbound, it's not a Sonic type game, right? So I was able to discern, oh, this is this and this is that in these genre styles, and this is how they put it together, and it sounds really cool.
Do you have an influence that you bring into your scoring that's maybe a bit left field or off the wall? You mentioned listen to lots of different types of music when you were younger and smooth jazz.
Yeah, I've got it's a big gamut of stuff. So yeah, I've got Quincy Jones, but I've also got Jesper Kuhd, I've got Kenji Ito, I've got Bernard Herrmann, really, and believe it or not, I've got that's in there. I've got Koatani, who's Shadow of the Colossus, and these are things I'm just thinking about, some that are coming off of the top of my mind. Norman Brown, I can hear, these are jazz artists. There's a lot.
How do you think things have been in the last sort of couple of years, as far as you can tell, either in the indie scene or AAA or anything in between? Are we on the right path, do you think?
In AAA, we're still playing it safe. I still hear, and I think it's because I can see a trend of if they want to typically work with TV composers or film composers, and it's just this weird, oh, we want to be like them, but now the other industry wants to be like us. So it was like the first games wanted to be like TV and film, and now TV and film wants to be like games, and that's that weird in between. And that's where you mentioned like Hans Zimmer or and other composers, Lauren Balfe, and the big composer names, and because they want that big orchestral sound. But the thing is, we've already done that so many times, and my ears frankly are tired, they're exhausted, and I don't know how many more French horn melodic sounds we can really do, and how many string runs we can come up with, no matter how many different, well, they're not really writing in too many odd time signatures or coming up with new ones. So they're, like I said, they're playing it safe, so that's not even happening. So but for indie games, I at least I'm starting to hear a little bit of a change and a growth. And this comes down really to, I've mentioned before, the mindset of the developer. If the developer is influenced by Hans Zimmer sound, that's what they're going to want. It's going to be hard to cajole them to think otherwise unless it's presented to them in a way that hopefully they're optimistic and they're open to the idea about it being changed. But then it comes down to, does it fit the game, right? Because so it's like a two-part process to even get to that state of evolving. If that's the case and more developers have that mindset of it being open and they're not stuck on that Hollywood orchestral sound, and they can feel and see, hey, I took an Elden Ring style game and put it with Animal Crossing, why can't the music kind of do the same and come in between? And so that's where my mindset has always been, because like I said before, I've been able to identify that in game music, in specific obscure games of just my own affinity and discovery, and starting to see that a little bit more of acceptance by that developer. Because what I do believe is that if the composer would kind of do their own thing on an album in itself, we probably would hear a lot more of the growth and the deviation of it just being chiptune style with nostalgia, or Hollywood orchestral with that, or the in-between of trying to conflate those. But they don't have that, right? Because it's got to fit within the art form. It's got to work with what the client wants or the developer's thinking and what they want, and pleasing that. So there's probably a mindset limitation happening. But through successful titles, I'm starting to notice, and this is just the game industry trend from the beginning, and I've noticed, right, one game does well and every other person wants to be that game. Limbo does well, they're going to try and do a Limbo game. Fortnite does well, they're going to try and do a Fortnite game. Everyone's trying to copy one another. And that's the trap.
Yes, absolutely, yeah. I mean, that's just commercial art, is just the money trends safer, doesn't it? Until an accident, a happy accident happens, like the Wachowskis get a massive budget to make a really crazy out there action film and redefine the genre, and with The Matrix, until you get someone with money takes a punt, places a big bet, but it's just you can't trust bigger companies to do that very often. In terms of the indie scene and developers, and just to step back a little bit into your experience, how have things been for you as an indie composer, for your peers in the last few years, drumming up projects? Has it been relatively fruitful time, or has it been quite tough?
It's a little bit in between. The returning collaborators I'm very thankful for is because I've built that relationship and they trust me and they like to have me back. But if I didn't have that, I think it would still be very hard. And that's been an uphill battle, I think, up until, like you said, like a few years, because it was always, I felt like I had to start over from scratch to earn trust and build relationship and to be seen, to be acknowledged, to show that I can do it, even though I probably had 10 games being shipped, which I thought would showcase the prowess and the professionalism and the consistency that would procure me some work a little bit quicker. But what I discovered is that it just doesn't work out that way all the time, and that there are seasons. There's a season where you're working and everything's going good, and then there's a season where things are kind of going to simmer out. And then there's a season you got nothing. It feels like probably like winter, right? So hopefully you've got something on the other side to bring in income. Maybe I've heard some composers do side gigs and odd jobs, or they're teaching
library stuff as well.
Yeah, exactly. And then it starts to open up and blossom again, right? Because nothing is I think what a friend of mine said, it's not real until the money's in the account. Because sometimes the contract, I used to think it was like, it's not real until the contract is signed, but that doesn't mean anything either typically. And you just never know. You just never knows.
We've heard that from quote unquote big composers. It's maybe unfair to call them big because of the pressure it puts on them, but I definitely seen someone like a Jason Graves out there talking about the struggles, mental health struggles and confidence and scoring projects. Even when you think you've got something in the bank, it somehow doesn't quite turn into jobs. And I'm sure, that's definitely something I've heard. I used to work for an actors agency years ago, and it's definitely something that actors struggle with constantly, even if they've had a lot of work and even if they've been going for a long time. That's the freelancer dichotomy, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And Jason and a couple of other people I remember being warned about this very early. Another well-known composer that mentioned the same thing. And I remember it was at a GDC party, and I was actually shocked, but I was warned. So I knew what I was getting into, at least. Was thinking, okay, if this person who scored these AAA games is having a rough time, I feel this is going to kind of be what it's like as well, but I'm going to do my best to not make it that if I can help it. And I'm so glad that you mentioned actors, because they're actually the motivation and constant inspiration I have when I see someone like Anthony Hopkins still acting, or I see another actor that I may haven't seen for a while, and then they resurface. Ryan Gosling kinds to come to mind. Like he was going so well, and then you didn't see him for a bit, and then he came out with The Gray Man, which is actually one of my favorite films to date right now. I've watched that movie 4 times, and the score is great too. And it's rare that all happens together. But in terms of actors, they are continuously, you see them and like, oh, I've seen them in this, and Kate Blanchett, and they're good to just see that they're still going and they haven't quit, and that I'm not sure what their personal lives are like in terms of if they do have at least 3 films in the works or not, but you do see them at least every couple years or so, or if you haven't seen them in a while, then you see them again after 5, 6, 7 years, and you're thinking, okay, if they're doing it, it's kind of similar, then I can do it too.
I also find inspiring people who keep at their art even into middle age and later, and sometimes don't even get quote unquote discovered or they don't have a hit, whatever hit means, until 50, 60 years on, and they become very, very well known. For video game composers, there's no age limit. You're not going to get aged out. I guess there's always a pressure to keep up technically, which might kind of frustrate people who've been doing music recording and music for media a certain way for a long time, and then suddenly there's so much for video game composers to kind of keep on top of as their career goes along, isn't there?
Yes, absolutely. And two composers come to mind in terms of not being aged out. The story I remember hearing at uni was that John Williams had scored about 50 films or so before he had hit Jaws and then Star Wars, right? But he was already upper 40s or something, and now John Williams is John Williams. But then and another composer, Himamoto Ryu, who composed for some various visual novel games, is a Japanese composer. And I think he was one who says that music knows no age. And by hearing these small anecdotes, it gives me I utilize that in my mind for a constant reminder of knowing, okay, yeah, and this is why I love being in this industry and doing what I'm doing, because I know that there is longevity.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So the game that we were kind of chatting about in terms of setting this conversation up was On the Peril of Parrots. Can you tell me a bit about the game itself and then how you got involved in the project?
Sure, yeah. So On the Peril of Parrots is developed by Sprite Wrench. We actually collaborated before on Questlight Pocket, and the co-founder developer's name is Glenn Henry. He's the developer in Jamaica. And On the Peril of Parrots is a puzzle game where you play as an AI to prove yourself to humanity. And so you've got to fill in you've got to
very timely.
Right, yeah. You've got to pull in you've got to fill in all of the block styles to complete the puzzle. But the difference between this is it's not so straightforward. There's different mechanics that are involved. So there might be a frog mechanic where it makes you skip tiles, and the paint where you got to color different colors, and you've got a bomb type of ticker where you've got to fill in multiple tiles. But this also comes through different phases that you get through in the puzzles. And so there's 100 puzzles or more that are implemented into the game itself. So it's quite a lot, and it does draw you in. And so how I got, like I said, part of it is that I had already shipped Questlight Pocket, which is a mobile game with Sprite Wrench. And so we connected on when the earlier puzzle, the prototype of knowing I had just finished Link's Awakening on the Game & Watch. I had already played that game as a child. That was one of my first Zelda games. But in Turtle Rock, there's a puzzle where you actually utilize the puzzle that's in On the Peril of Parrots. And so Glenn had connected with, that puzzle's in Oracle of Ages, and I had played both of those too, and Seasons and Ages. And so I guess because Link's Awakening came first, they utilized the puzzle in Oracle of Ages, and so I realized, okay, cool, so this is what the puzzle was like. And so he gave me the reference of what was already in the prototype, and it was Bossa Nova, and it was really good reference of thinking, okay, well, what are we doing with this, and why are we doing that? And so I had to think about, okay, I'm going to write Bossa Nova, which is one of my favorite genres. I grew up with that, loving it, and now I have the opportunity to make it in my own style, but actually make it for a game itself. It was a big challenge, and wanted to do proper research and pay homage to the late 60s, early 70s sound. of that, pull it into a 21st century era, make it my sound, and put it into a game all at the same right. It's because it's got to fit all of those things and feel nice. So that's how I got involved.
It does feel like a natural fit, doesn't it, to take a smooth music genre, something that's relaxing, that's easy to enjoy. Did that seem like a natural fit, or were you trying to find actually a way to spice it up and make it more intense, or was the atmosphere of the game kind of something that required a bit of an edge? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. You're touching on it. You're touching on it very, very well. And so, like I said, so the challenging part for that is pay homage in terms of learning from the one I listened to the most was Carlos Obim, is a Brazilian composer and wrote a lot of that, which is considered like mostly, I think, the grandfather of bossa nova, then Gilberto, Astrid Gilberto, and a couple others that I have in the development journal I was writing. But me, as how I write, and people know my sound, I have an eclectic niche sound, especially as a video game composer. So I was trying to spice it up. I was trying to make it feel like 60, 70. It's got to fit the puzzle game. It needs to not frustrate them, but to relax them. How do I just change it, but not change it so much where they're going to feel this isn't bossa nova, but feel okay? Well, it doesn't pull me out of the game either, and so doing that was the purpose of it, because the storyline, and I don't want to give too much away, does touch on things that we're concerned about. Like I said, you've got to prove yourself to humanity, and you're playing an AI, and so it does have some dark spots. It does have some places where you feel, well, as you progress in the story, that are on edge and uneasy, and that may feel ambiguous. And that is also part of the texture that I was leaning towards to make it fit within the game itself.
Is this the first time that you've had to kind of take into consideration where the story's going and how it might affect the genre of your soundtrack music?
Yes, absolutely. So I've definitely dealt with this before, and that as working on the development team, I understand that it evolves as it's being developed. So nothing is right. It's a prototype, but then to get to things change, and that's when these whole terminology of scope creep come in, or feature creep. But within understanding, okay, what are we doing here? And so there's only 2 projects that I know for sure this has happened, whereas I've seen this. It started out when I was on the project very early, like on the Peril Parrots, and then it changed, and it's a ground, and it's on the Peril Parrots, because actually on the Peril Parrots, we wanted to do a dynamic music design that I came up with, whereas it would, as you progress through certain levels, you'd get different instrument layer changes that would open up to you. So instead of it just being the percussion, now you've got like the guitar, and now maybe a vocal comes in, but you'd have to complete in a succession of puzzles to unlock those layers of the piece itself. That may still be in the game. It may not be. I'm not completely sure. I don't think it is, but because like I said, it changed, right? So the direction changed about it, and then so once that direction changed, it became more of the focus of what is this? What are we telling with the story after the cutscene? So as you play up to a certain amount of puzzles, the cutscene happens in between. You think you're going to go to another puzzle, and then something changes. You get interrupted. The story develops, and then you continue back into the puzzle. You do a couple more. The story changes. The music changes, and other things kind of go along with that there too. So yeah, I've definitely been in the position, like I said before, and you just kind of go with the direction of what the game is asking for, and it's really the best way to go about it.
You have done several different genres, several different games. Is that something that you consciously, you're like, I need to change from project to project. I need to at least check with the developer if it's okay. You know, that's what the client wants. But, to keep alive creatively, ideally, I need to kind of bring something new to this, or go and research a new style of music that hasn't been done in a game I've worked on.
In the beginning, it was about being able to write in all the styles, because like I mentioned, I knew that video game composition was about conflating different styles or being direct. But I knew that if you had to write in different styles per project, you want classical, cool, you want rock, cool, you want ambient, you want jazz, you want this. And so now it comes from, okay, at least I learned all the styles to do. I know the forms, I know the techniques. Now, how do we bring this into the game to actually make this a little bit different? And so I really focused on that from the early of my career to get into the point where I am now, to be able to say, like, this is what we're doing. And I believe that they trust me to know that it's not going to be a direct style. They want something fresh, because what it should be is that sonic identity, to be able to, if you're in the room and you hear a game playing in the other room and you hear this piece of music from this game, you know exactly what it is. You don't have to think, well, it's this genre music, so it could be this game, it could be this game. It's like, no, it's this specific game because it's that specific sound and sonic and signature. That's what I love about the studies that I've done, and how I realized I needed the challenge. That's what I want to say, is that I need the consistent challenge of knowing this is going to be this. It's not going to sound like anything else. I'm not doing this intentionally. I'm doing this because I guess it's innate within me from just studying game music at an early age.
The soundtracks that gamers go wild for, and that game music fans go wild for, I think now I think about it, are the ones with the best sonic identity. You know, so many people love Nier Automata and Persona and Fez, and Everybody's Gone to the Rapture, and all these different soundtracks that are very different from each other.
Right.
But I think a true fan of that game could hear 4 seconds of the score and be like, yep, that's from that.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. You brought me back to an experience I had, I think last year. I was in a battery store of all places, and I walked in the store. I go in the store and I hear this music, and I'm thinking, oh, this isn't the typical music that you would normally hear on, that playing over the speaker. And so I waited and I waited and I waited about 2 minutes, and then I thought, I'm gonna ask the cashier. I said, so you're playing video game music? And he said, yeah, how did you know? I'm thinking, this is Kingdom Hearts. And I'm a video game composer, and he's like, oh, that's really cool. But I recognized it based off of the palette, based off of the sound. It's not typical. Then I was thinking, well, wait a minute, because I had to think, if the song changes, then this is a fluke. But if it stays consistent, this person set this up to play this on purpose, saying they really like video game music. And I love that. I love that so much, because I actually did that when I worked at a retail store, at the music store at Sam Ash. And customers didn't like it at all, but I didn't care. I was like, this is my shift. I'm going to play what I want. You want to hear anything else, you can go to the guitar section or drums or wherever. But in Pro Audio, we're playing this over here.
Very good, very good. If you could sort of send a message out to kind of, I guess, indie developers in general, in terms of genre, in terms of music genre, do you wish that level of kind of creative in charge of a game's aesthetic were braver when it comes to music genre? Or do you think it's more, like you've mentioned a couple of times, do you think maybe they need to put a bit of thought into the music, go away, make Spotify playlists about what they might want, but then put more trust in a musician they're hiring, a composer that they're hiring, to tweak, alter that genre direction, because they're the expert, really?
I want to lean more on the latter, and it's because if I'm the developer, I'm trusting, and I know I need help for this project, and I know that I can't do it myself. So the whole point of coming to the composer is so that they can create something hopefully unique. And by being brave enough to even take that step, number one, and then coming up with your own references, I think is very strong, but not being married to those references, is because this is when the detachment comes to say, this is what the game is about. These are the things that I liked, but diving a little bit even more deeper, and this is what I typically do with clients, is what did you like about the specific drum section in this reference from this minute to this minute? What didn't you like about this? What would you take out? What would you, now we're crafting something, because I can get into the mind of how they're thinking about it, what emotional feeling they may or may not be telling me, and then being able to do something on my own. They obviously like my sound. They know that I'm competent to create something that will come together. I want to briefly share a perfect example about this that it comes to mind, is that Klexos Interactive hired me to do this VR game called Hey Pops, and they wanted a 1920, a 1950, and a 1990 sound all together. And I said, okay, all right, I'm gonna do it. So I knew 1920s. You've got this early orchestral, but very much big band sound, and now you've got the 50s. This is Hollywood's richest moments of coming into these flourishing embellishments, and then you have this 1990. Well, we're kind of now doing hip hop, I guess, or we're doing more street and urban,
New Jack Swing.
Yeah, New Jack Swing. So now, what does that sound like? Well, they had a reference of playlists together of all those eras, but then I'm the one they trusted to put it together for 3 different pieces. And so I did it. And because they trusted me to do that, they were very impressed. They were very happy with it, and it fit. And not only that, it fit the actual game for telling the story even more.
Yeah, so the message is be brave enough to trust, rather than necessarily kind of be completely open-minded and just, hand it all over.
Right, because what I found on that side is that you think that they trust you when they do that. This is always the case, but but when they say like, yeah, do whatever you want, then you'll realize that they actually do have an opinion, way more so than you thought they did. And so it was like, oh, well, you actually did know what you wanted. You just were trying to see what I come up with and see if you liked it. But that's like cooking, right? Oh, make whatever you want tonight. And then I decided to make this. Oh, actually, I don't like mushrooms.
Yeah, that's like a creative trap in a way, isn't it? Well, great stuff. Well, thank you so much for joining me for this discussion, Chase. Okay, so thanks very much to Chase for that interview. We really, really appreciate it. We're going to move on to Done in 60 Seconds, where we take about 60 seconds to recommend each other something. Hopefully we'll inspire the other one to want to take a listen. I think it's my turn first, I'm pretty sure. So I'm going to get my stopwatch ready. So Matt, I was sent the soundtrack for Planet of Lana, which is a hand-painted puzzle adventure game framed by an epic sci-fi saga that stretches across centuries and galaxies. And it looks really good. It kind of reminds me of Inside a little bit. I love those kind of games when they nail the aesthetics. The composer is Takeshi Furukawa, who is an award-winning Japanese-American composer, and he's best known, I think, in the gaming space for The Last Guardian, which is, of course, a wonderful score, orchestral score. He's currently scoring Mythic Quest. I think he's doing the Avatar The Last Airbender live-action remake as well. Anyway, the Planet of Lana score is huge. It's sci-fi. It's expressive. There's sort of lots of dynamics in there. He's just got a really deft touch. It's a fantastic listen, and I absolutely, wholeheartedly recommend it.
You've absolutely sold that. That sounds class. A lot of my friends talked about the Avatar The Last Airbender as well, which you've reminded me I need to watch now. But yeah, Furukawa's a champ. Let's take a listen. That is beautiful. Goes a different direction, that, when those horns come in, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That lovely, lovely uplift, like real positive major sound, and then all of a sudden, boom. But yeah, really, that's really cool. Kind of builds on the sound that he's known for. Big fan of that.
Good stuff. What have you got for me?
Right. I have got for you plenty of riffs. And before I actually go into this, I need to start by giving a shout out to a guy called Peter Line. He has got a video game music newsletter called Now Playing, which basically is just a rundown of the latest video game soundtracks that are out. There's a lot of stuff in there that I'm discovering and wasn't previously aware of, which is how I heard about this. So I'll whack a link to his newsletter in the description because it's worth subscribing to. But this is from a game called Trepang 2. I believe it's in alpha, or maybe at the moment I can see clips of the game, but it's not officially out yet. But basically, if you love Mick Gordon's music for Doom and Doom Eternal, you are going to absolutely love this. It is heavy as sin.
Let's give it a go. Okay, that is intense. That's big. That's absolutely enormous.
As someone who played in a metal band for like however long, or has been playing in a metal band since I was a kid even, it's great that there's this kind of revival of metal music coming back. And I think a lot of that, to be fair, is down to Gordon stuff in Doom, because that's shown there's an appetite, right? Like, those games didn't do any worse because of the heavy music in them. And I think prior to that, yeah, of course, there's been metal in video games before that, but I think there's probably always been a fear around, if we make the music in this game too heavy, is that going to put certain people off? We can't assume that everybody listens to metal music, etc., etc. But this guy, Brandon McKagan, he's like, nah, can go heavier. Like, let's get some weird, horrible, distorted synth stuff over the top. But yeah, I've got my eyes on this now after hearing that music. It's heavy as
F. Well, that's all we've got time for, sadly, on this GXM podcast. Thanks so much for joining us on our exploration at the intersection between our two favourite things, video games and music, of course. Please be sure to subscribe and leave us a review on your podcast service of choice, especially Apple Podcasts. That really helps other people find us too. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram at GXM Podcast. I'm T Quilfer on Twitter, that's TQILLFELDT. Matt is at Matt Ombler on Twitter, that's Matt with only one T. And if you have any feedback, comments, complaints, corrections, that sort of thing, hit us up at gxmpodcast@gmail.com. The show was produced by both of us, it was edited by me, and music is by Zach Foster. Thanks, and see you later. Cool, good stuff. I always say good stuff. My brain is in nowhere land, which is good.